Across the eastern Mediterranean, peoples from rugged, resource-poor regions, the Greeks, the Phoenicians, and the ancient Hebrews, all followed similar paths. They emigrated, formed vast diasporas, and built influence through networks of trade and commerce. Large Jewish communities sprang up across the Mediterranean and Mesopotamia. Babylon alone had a population of 1 million Jews. When the Romans arrived in the Levant in the 1st century BCE, the global Jewish population was estimated to be between 4 and 6 million, with approximately 2 million Jews residing in Palestine and around 3 million Jews in the diaspora. The 3 Roman Jewish wars had a devastating impact on Jews everywhere. Important diaspora communities in Cyprus, Alexandria, and Libya were annihilated, the Temple in Jerusalem were destroyed, and Judea was virtually depopulated. The center of Jewish life and scholarship shifted north to Galilee and eventually to Babylon, which was unaffected by the Roman reprisals because it was in the Persian Empire. Although Rome did not create the diaspora or exile the entire Jewish population of Palestine, it did inflict a catastrophic blow on Jewish civilization. Roman rule also initiated a millennium of persecution that the European heirs of Roman civilization would carry on. Zionism was born in 19th century Europe in reaction to a rising wave of violent anti-Semitism. Many early Zionists had personally experienced the brutality of the Tsarist pogroms, which cost the lives of over 100,000 Jews. To ensure Jewish survival, they proposed a Jewish form of European ethno-nationalism, one that would employ colonial settlement as the vehicle for realizing a strong Jewish state. To understand this solution, you have to understand the world that produced it. European racial and civilizational superiority was taken as self-evident. Colonization was framed as a moral duty, a way to civilize supposedly backward peoples. The wishes of native populations were not only ignored, but also considered irrelevant. The Zionists reimagined Judaism as a 19th century European political ideology. They appropriated the language, symbols, and historical traumas of Judaism and combined them with the blood and soil mythology of European ethno-nationalism. To make this work, the Zionists set about creating a new narrative of Jewish history. Before Rome, the Jewish diaspora was a successful network of commerce, culture, and trade across the Mediterranean. But beginning with the Roman reprisals, it became a centuries-long European trail of tears, marked by ghettoization, forced conversions, pogroms, and expulsions. Over time, this suffering was interpreted through a theological lens, exile as divine punishment, to be ended only by a miraculous redemption. Zionism broke with that tradition. In the Zionist retelling, exile wasn't the result of sin, but of powerlessness, of vulnerability that made Jews perpetual victims. And the solution wasn't to wait for God, but to act, to build an impregnable nation-state through human effort, not divine intervention. Zionists fabricated a much simpler tale of this history for public consumption. We were living happily in Judea, then the Romans came and kicked us all out. Now we're back. It's not remotely accurate, but when combined with another big lie, a land without people for a people without land, it whitewashed colonization and made for an inspiring fairy tale. In this new Zionist mythology, every Jew had been yearning for 2,000 years to return from exile to their ancient homeland. Yet when millions of Jews fled persecution in Europe between the 1880s and the 1920s, only about 50,000 chose to join the Zionists in Palestine. In contrast, over 2 million sought refuge in the diaspora of the Americas. And what about the 350,000 Jews who lived as citizens of the Ottoman Empire for centuries? They were free to settle anywhere within its borders, including Palestine. But over the course of 500 years, virtually none of them chose to move there. Zionism also gave anti-Semites and ethno-nationalists a story they could love. The Jews don't belong here. They belong somewhere else. Germany for Germans, a Jewish state for Jews. For evangelical Christians, there was a bonus. You not only got rid of the Jews, you hastened the second coming and the rapture by returning the Jews to Israel. One anti-Semite in particular proved indispensable to Zionist plans: British Lord Arthur Balfour. Lord Balfour had this to say in defense of the Aliens Act of 1905, which limited Jewish immigration. The undoubted evils that have fallen upon the East End of London in recent years through the immigration of a very poor class of foreign Jews are not imaginary, but real. Chaim Weizmann was a brilliant chemist whose scientific contributions to the war effort won him the ear of both Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour and Prime Minister David Lloyd George. This enabled Weizmann to eventually secure their backing for a Jewish state in Palestine in the form of the Balfour Declaration. For Lord Balfour, it was a win-win. It would stem Jewish immigration into Britain, and the Jewish colony would be a strategically positioned outpost of European civilization in a sea of Oriental savages. As Zionist leader Theodor Herzl had written years earlier, "For Europe, we would constitute there in Palestine a part of a wall against Asia. We would serve as the outpost of civilization against barbarism." Weizmann also pointed out the strategic value of a European colony alongside the critically important Suez Canal. We had long pointed out to the British, and I repeated it again in my interview with Lord Cecil, that a Jewish Palestine would be a safeguard to England, in particular in respect to the Suez Canal. But what about the Arab inhabitants of Palestine? Balfour had this to say about the rights of subject peoples in the House of Commons: "You may talk of the rights of the subject races, but there are races so low in the scale of civilization that one cannot expect them to appreciate the benefits of British rule." Here is Balfour in the House of Commons in all his white supremacist glory. We have to face the facts. Men are not born equal. The white and black races are not born with equal capacities. They are born with different capacities which education cannot and will not change. It was no surprise then that for Balfour and the European Zionists, Arab lives were irrelevant to the lofty goals of a superior race. Balfour wrote in a private memo in 1919 to Lord Curzon, "The contradiction between the letter of the covenant and the policy of the Allies is even more flagrant in the case of the independent nation of Palestine than in that of the independent nation of Syria. For in Palestine we do not propose even to go through the form of consulting the wishes of the present inhabitants of the country." It turns out that European treaties, covenants, and promises didn't apply to brown people. What distinguishes Zionism from other 19th century colonial projects is not its racist colonial origins or its religious justifications, which were typical of its era, but its persistence. 100 years ago, you would have found dozens of apartheid settler colonies battling natives who refused to accept colonization. Today, only one remains. Thanks for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe buttons if you would like to see more content like this.